Senate motions, clerk will read.
We have a point of personal privilege from Senator Holdman. Senator Holdman, Chair recognizes Senator Holdman.
Thank you, Madam President, and members of the Senate. All of you have received a handout that looks like this that was placed by my staff at your seat today. Today happens to be the 150th anniversary today of President Lincoln's address at Gettysburg on the dedication of the cemetery at Gettysburg. We are honored today to have Dr. Wesley Rediger from Upland, Indiana, home of the world-famous Ivanhoes, if you've never been to Upland before. But we're honored to have him here today. He has served the nonprofit sector for 45 years across America, the Caribbean, the United Kingdom, and the Middle East. And his father, interesting fact here, Milo Rediger, was the dean at Taylor University for 25 years and president of the university for 13 years. And the chapel is named after him. My daughter attended and graduated from Taylor University. And he will have a few remarks for us commemorating this day in history, the 150th anniversary of President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And I would ask the Madam President that you place us in recess that he may address the body today.
The Senate is placed in recess.
Madam President, Senators Long and Holdman, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate of Indiana, imagine for a moment that half of us here in this room own slaves, and that we are eager to stand up in public and advocate on behalf of slavery. That was American society in 1863. They were at war, killing 600,000 of their own countrymen over that divisive issue. And in the midst of it, Abraham Lincoln focused on the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. With those words, the Founding Fathers acknowledged that liberty and equality are combined by the Creator in the essence of being human in every human being. You and I and everybody else on the planet are equal and free in what it is to be human, in what it means to be human. And it is the task of federal, state, and local government to bring this self-evident and revolutionary truth to society for all the people by law. But there was a flaw. Many of the Founding Fathers owned slaves, and although they signed and wrote all men, they did not include all men or any women. And 84 years later, Abraham Lincoln was elected President of the United States. The next month, December 1860, South Carolina was the first of 11 states to secede from the United States of America, which Lincoln always believed was unconstitutional and illegal, and he referred to them as the so-called Confederacy. But that was when he began to understand how horrific the future was going to be. Like anybody, he wished it would not happen. He committed his administration to diplomacy. He determined not to fire the first shot, but he knew. As his family boarded the train to move to Washington, he spoke to the crowd gathered at the Great Western Railroad station in Springfield. He said, "To this place and to the kindness of this people, I owe everything. Here I've lived a quarter of a century and have passed from a young to an old man. Here my children have been born, and one is buried. And now I leave, not knowing when or whether ever I may return, with a task before me greater than that which rested upon Washington. Why did Abraham Lincoln believe that his task was greater than George Washington's Revolutionary War? Washington's task was to wrest this new nation from the grasp of England by killing as many British soldiers as it took to persuade their survivors to surrender and get out. Kill the enemy until they leave. Lincoln's task was to restore the United States of America by killing as many of his own countrymen who were in nearsighted rebellion as it took to persuade their survivors and relatives to concede defeat, reconcile hatred, reject revenge, rebuild their farms and cities, and reconstruct this nation as fellow citizens of one reunited States of America so they could live together and their children could grow up friends. Kill them so we can live together and our children can grow up friends. A horrific irony, and a task that Abraham Lincoln knew was infinitely greater than George Washington's, infinitely greater, because he knew it would need to be accomplished in the minds and hearts of every succeeding generation, including yours and mine. You and I, we are vital links in Lincoln's long legacy. 3 years into his term, he went to Gettysburg. 15,000 people gathered outdoors. Edward Everett delivered a 2-hour oration, common in that day, after which Lincoln jumped to his feet, vigorously shook his hand, thanking him for eloquently laying out the rationale for the war in the hope of a reunited States of America. And then after they sang a hymn, President Lincoln stepped forward. And he delivered 2.5-minute, 272-word, immortal call to immediate personal action. 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We come to dedicate a portion of it as a final resting place for those who died here that the nation might live. This we may in all propriety do. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate. We cannot consecrate. We cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who struggled here, hallowed it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, while they can never forget what they did here. It is rather for us, the living, we here, be dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they here gave the last full measure of devotion, that we here highly resolve these dead shall not have died in vain, and that the nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom and the government of the people, by the people, and for the people, shall not perish from the earth. A year and a half later, General Lee ran out of everything but honor, and he conceded defeat to General Grant. And 5 short days later, President Lincoln was shot in the back of the head, and he died the next morning. If we are to be a government of the people, by the people, and for all the people, we must listen to each other carefully. The Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States were wrought by compromise, by listening across the aisle and by working together for all the people on this 150th anniversary of President Lincoln's immortal address at Gettysburg. May we rededicate ourselves to the great task of government for all the people. To listen, listen, listen. To listen until we understand the partial truth in our different points of view and work together toward the great American compromise, toward accomplishing the uniquely American ideal. If you listen well to each other, perhaps you'll show the rest of the nation and the world how it's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rediger.